Uh, I'm here to talk about the Global Commission for the Stability of Cyberspace and to basically bring you up to speed on what we are doing in terms of articulating norms with regards to conduct in cyberspace and conduct during cyber warfare. So thank you very much, the ORF, for inviting me, and thank you very much for staying around to listen. I hope at least you will learn a few things. The Global Commission for the Stability of Cyberspace, or the GCSC, is basically a group of people who have been brought together to ensure the stability of cyberspace. And when we say stability, we have to be a bit careful, because stability does not necessarily connote stagnation. As we know, cyberspace is quite innovative, things move quite quickly. And so we look at stability as the freedom to enjoy the benefits of cyberspace without fear. It's actually an ambitious goal. Global peace, global stability, whether cyber or analog, is actually ambitious. But it is certainly something worth striving for. We must note that the norms that we are developing are, well, political commitments, and they're very voluntary. And we've seen the establishments of norms in traditional kinetic warfare. For example, don't attack schools, don't use certain chemical gases, don't attack hospitals, don't attack women and children. And as you all know, ladies and gentlemen, those norms are often violated. But that's important to note. But you can only determine if norms are violated by having them in the first place. So the issue is to establish some norms. The issue is then to develop the red lines to know when these norms are crossed, and also to understand by what degree those norms have been violated. So yes, we do expect the norms that we develop will probably be violated over time. However, as the Chinese say, this is but one step in a journey of 1,000 miles. So we're not alone in this endeavor. Other organizations have endeavored to develop norms. Some of you may have heard of previous iterations of the UN group of governmental experts, the UNGGE, specifically in the field of information and communications technologies, and in the context of the Internet Society. The IGF, the Internet Governance Forum, and several other groups, including actually the organizers of this event, the ORF, they too have been developing independently their own set of norms. There are very interesting initiatives on norms developments coming out of the World Economic Forum. And of course, we heard a little earlier about issues related to the Paris Call and the Christchurch call to eliminate terrorism and online extremism. Now, in terms of the GCSC, our first where are we coming from? We're basically, we arise from the conclusions of the 4th Global Conference, GCCS, sorry about these acronyms, that held in The Hague back in 2015. And then subsequent to that, sometime towards, I think 2016 or so, the UNGGE process, which, to be fair, had been making incremental and reasonable progress, had developed some norms, but at the final stage, the members were unable to reach a consensus, and arguably, the process failed. So having said that, where are the members? Where are we from? Well, we're from all over the place. South Africa, Nigeria, Brazil. We have several members from the US, from parts of Western Europe, Russia, China, of course, India. To be honest, ladies and gentlemen, we're in Africa. And as Samir Samran pointed out on our first meeting, the membership is rather pale. And so we do need much more representation from the Global South. But truth be told, anybody can join, especially the research advisory group, cyberstability.org. You can look it up a bit later. Who are behind it? Well, the Secretariat is made up of two organizations, the Hague Center for Strategic Studies, based in The Hague, and also the East-West Institute. Where does our funding come from? From quite a few sources. The governments of the Netherlands, from Singapore, from France, from Estonia, organizations such as Microsoft, the Internet Society, affiliates, they are all making contributions to this effort. And the Secretariat is physically in The Hague. And so our activities are actually well supported by this research advisory group, which, like I said, any of us here today are welcome to join. Some of the people. Well, we have quite an interesting set of characters who sit down. And if I may just turn to point out a couple. Starting from just beyond the logo on the top left, we now have two co-chairs. Originally, we had a chair and two co-chairs. And the co-chairs, one is a gentleman called Michael Chertoff. He used to be the head of the Department of Homeland Security in the US. And in fact, he was a federal judge. And he was the judge for New York, Manhattan in particular, on that infamous day of 9/11. We also have a very elegant, the elegant lady is not here at the moment, but we have an elegant Indian lady, and her name is Ambassador Lata Reddy. She used to be the Deputy National Security Advisor to, I guess, the Prime Minister of India. That would be the proper term. And the third person across is somebody called Ambassador Marina, Kalyan, and she was actually our chair. She's still part of us, she still attends our meeting, but during about a month or so ago, she had to step down. And the reason she had to step down was because she was voted into the European Parliament, and she felt it was better to have a much more lower profile. But she particularly is from Estonia. And interestingly, she was the Estonian ambassador to Moscow when the incidents were real, but they allegedly emanated from Russia. So she was in the middle of it. We have a lot of other interesting characters, but let me just move across to people like Chris Painter. He was the cybersecurity advisor to President Obama. You have people like Jeff Moss. He's the owner and organizer of an event called Black Hat, which is the largest hacking conference in the world. You have our advisors. We have a gentleman called Vince Cerf. We talked about Tim Berners-Lee today. He developed www. Vince Cerf was the co-inventor of TCP/IP, which actually makes computer A talk to computer B, and so on and so forth. Sorin Dokaru was the NATO Secretary General. We have people like Carl Bildt, the former Prime Minister of Sweden. And so the list goes on and on and on. But again, as you can see, all of these people have quite a bit of experience and a significant amount of credibility. So in terms of the mandates that we were given or we've assigned ourselves, really, the bottom line is that we are here to develop policies and norms coherence. We were launched in 2017 at the Munich Security Conference, and we endeavor to meet approximately 4 times a year. Our mandate was for 3 years, and so technically we end at the end of this year. We will probably release our final report sometime in the last quarter. So, I won't bore you with the specifics of the definitions. You'll be able to read these online. But like I said, our intent is to promote the utilization of cyberspace without fear, not to stagnate development in cyberspace. And so we must ensure, and this also goes to you, that as we evolve our thinking, our norms, we do not want to stifle innovation. We do want to be able to have that bubbling up and moving along. And this is a general outline of our methodology. We got it a little backwards, and there were actually cogent reasons for this. We developed some norms, defined some of our thinking, and then they started developing the principles. Normally, you develop the principles first, but because of the way we started, and then we are now working on issues related to what would we envisage the security, the global security architecture to be, and of course, we're working hard on articulating our recommendations for our report, which will be released next year. But in the meantime, we have developed some norms, and these norms go across a relatively wide spectrum. To your left, you will see something called norms to protect the public core. And we'll get into a few details in a minute, but the point is that we look at the public core of the internet as like a global commons. It's like the ocean. It belongs to all of us. Just because you pollute the ocean in Tunisia doesn't mean it's not going to affect Morocco and vice versa. And so we have to be careful what we do in our part of the ocean. And protecting the public core really is a function of the performance or even of the existence of cyberspace in the first place. So that's why you notice critical of cyberspace. The of is the important thing. At the other end of the spectrum, we developed some norms for non-interference by state and non-state actors in the electoral system. For all of us, we're trying to build, again, in slightly different ways with our own nuances, but we're trying to build our own kinds of democracy. And so it is not right, in our opinion, for third parties to try and skew the democracy, affect the democracy, but actually to affect the process. And so these are things, that is the functioning of society now, not just cyberspace. And so this is critical in cyberspace as an outcome. And then we have others in between, and we'll get to those in a moment. So in terms of the norm to protect cyberspace, for us, this is very foundational. And again, I won't spend too much time reading the norm to you. You can do that for yourselves. But what constitutes the public core? So what we've done is that we've said, well, there are three critical elements. The first element is the logical infrastructure. For example, the TCP/IP that people like Vint Cerf developed, Internet Protocol 4, Internet Protocol 6, that some of us may be familiar with, the routing protocols. How does a packet of data get from A to B? The second part is the physical infrastructure. So, Morocco has an issue with Spain. Spain, as a norm, should not go and cut the fiber cable that passes along Spain's coast and feeds Morocco, feeds Senegal, goes around to Nigeria, down to Angola and South Africa. And then the other part of that public core are some of the organizations. So for example, our computer emergency response teams, they are like the hospitals. They are the ones who help the system to recover. And then, like I mentioned, the electoral infrastructure. Now, very importantly, we did not include the issues of fake news and hate speech and the hacking of the electorate. And there are a couple of reasons. One, we wanted to keep things simple, and we also appreciated that there need to be many, many more conversations about this issue because it touches on human rights, privacy, and we wanted to be a bit careful so that we could get a broader consensus on view. So very quickly, these are some of the packages we're talking about. Norms to avoid tampering. norms against the commandeering of botnets. So basically, you should not forcefully conscript other people's equipment into your army, so to speak. Norms to create a vulnerabilities equities process. Now, a VEP, or vulnerabilities equities process, is where flaws in software or operating systems are identified. And what happens is that governments have been guilty of hoarding that information because they want to use it for their own nefarious ends. But of course, that information leaks, and suddenly the bad guys have it. And yet you and I, as the innocent masses, so to speak, are not aware that the flaws even exist, how much more to allowing the companies to take care of them. So what we're advocating for here is that there should be some kind of process that, yes, you can identify the flaws, but you must have some kind of agreed timeline, which you as a country set, to be able to make this public and give the producers, the manufacturers, the publishers of the software the opportunity to block those flaws. We also have norms to mitigate significant vulnerabilities. And again, this is about developing things properly. The norms on basic cyber hygiene, again, if we use the river as an example, if you dam the river upstream or you put chemical waste into it, everybody downstream is affected. So we must make cyber hygiene, cyber health, as Jarius had mentioned earlier today, a fundamental issue that the state should push. And then finally, we have the norm against offensive cyber operations. And this talks to the issue of hackback. As a society, we must minimize vigilantism. One of the reasons is that, as we know, attribution is difficult. Okay, America said it was Russia that interfered in their elections. Are you sure? Are you sure it wasn't some guy in California who routed all his packets through a server in Moscow? It's technically possible. But more importantly, attribution is actually a political decision, not a technical decision. So, where are we going on this? Well, we have some immediate asks, and these are asks of you. We want you to look at these norms. We want you to read them. We hope and we pray that you will understand them. More importantly, we hope and we want you to internalize them. Obviously, then, we want you to practice them. If possible, we are open to improvement. We are not saying it's perfect. No, it isn't. It's a beginning. So if there are improvements you can suggest, we're more than open. And we want you to champion them. Again, as I said, by the end of this year, first quarter of next year, we are done. Now, there might be a subsequent organization, but actually, we want you to champion them. And in short, ladies and gentlemen, we want you to own the norms. Having said that, we are looking at how we can, not us, but how the process can continue. What kind of institutional mechanisms? Should we have a digital peace institute? Should we leverage ICANN, the Internet Governance Forum, the UN? I mean, these are all institutional mechanisms that could be considered. None is absolutely right, and none is absolutely wrong. We need to continue the advocacy. And the truth is, like I mentioned, attribution is a very, very difficult hot potato to handle. And eventually, we want to get to a point where the essence of the norms are codified into international law. And as Africans, and I would like the Africans here, when you go back home, please understand something. We need to develop a generation of cyber diplomats. The issues are diplomatic. International agreements are going to be negotiated. New laws are going to be articulated. It's not fundamentally an IT problem. It's between nation states. But the diplomats need to be empowered with an understanding and awareness of the IT and cyber issues so that they can go and discuss these things on our behalf. So, ladies and gentlemen, Please understand, as I said, we can only clap with one hand. I mean, we can't clap with one hand, and therefore it is important that we work together. Your success is our success, and I pray that our success is your success. Thank you very much.